I'm Bobby Hoon, and let's queer up the worldview. Niger arrests dozens in LGBTQ plus crackdown after new law criminalizes same-sex relations. Niger's military government is facing growing international criticism after dozens of people were reportedly arrested following the country's first ever law criminalizing same-sex relations. Speaking with The Guardian, local media report that up to 40 people have been arrested, with 16 men, including high-ranking military officials, imprisoned since the new penal code took place in February. The law allows prison sentences of up to 10 years for same-sex relations and up to 20 years for participating in, organizing, or supporting LGBTQ plus organizations or same-sex marriages. An anonymous source working with HIV services described the situation as a witch hunt, adding, quote, LGBTQ plus populations are keeping a low profile, have gone into hiding because they are at risk. We have lost contact with many, end quote. The source also warns that the crackdown has disrupted HIV prevention efforts, leaving many without access to condoms, HIV testing, or PrEP. Human rights groups Frontline Defenders said it is deeply concerned by the developments and urged Nigeria's authorities to repeal laws that criminalize people based on their sexual orientation or gender identity. All right, for those who are not well versed in, what Niger is, let's just step up primer. Niger is a country in Africa. It is a former French colony, not to be confused with Nigeria, which is a former British colony. Until now, they actually don't have anti-sodomy laws. As a matter of fact, since France never had anti-sodomy laws since the Napoleonic era, 1791, I believe. Don't quote me on that one, though. So French colonies back in the age of colonization, they don't have it either. So this is not a case of like British Victorian anti-sodomy values filtered down. And this is, however, possibly the culprits of basically anti-Western sentiment, because a lot of times these quote-unquote anti-Western groups or anti-Western governments generally want to lump LGBTQ plus identity into some kind of like decadent Western import thing, except that indigenously in pre-colonial Africa, there have been instances of people who are identified openly as LGBTQ. Mm-hmm. In ancient Egypt, we found a tomb that celebrated a literal male couple. They found a whole tomb celebrating that with murals and everything. So I'm not saying that applies to every place in Africa. After all, it's a very big continent. But this kind of like anti-gay drive based on so-called anti-Western values is usually bunk because it historically doesn't add up.
I will concede that for once this is not England's fault, which normally you can get away with England's fault.
Blame England. Yeah. However, it might be America's fault.
Well, because that's what I was going to say, and you know what I talked to you about earlier. Don't take my thunder, girl. So like, what people should remember about Niger is, how did the military get here? Who has been propping that military up? Now, the U.S. government does not support the coup that happened, but the U.S. government has been supporting Niger's military for decades. When there was the whole Iraq war lead up, they had all this stuff about the yellow cake in Iraq, and they worked with Niger to come up with that BS. Like, this is, once again, American imperialism tends to create a lot of the problems we're seeing in the world. And this is horrific that Nigeria's government is doing this. But like, why do you think we're where we are today with Niger?
While I would concede that America can be partially at fault, right now, though, since the 2023 coup, U.S. troops and French troops have been expelled from Niger. Do you know who they replaced it with?
Was it Iran?
Russian.
The Ruski.
Russian mercenaries, specifically from the Wagner group, the group that also helped invade Ukraine, is the driving force that expelled U.S. and French troops and expand Russian influence in the region. So to say that this is America's fault now that they have been in power for 3 years, now suddenly this anti-sodomy law come up, I'm not entirely sure that can be directly correlated. However,
they just trained the military now in charge.
But however, guess who also have Guess which country also has similar laws that punish people for promoting same-sex marriage or participating in LGBTQ civil society? Russia.
Soviets, yes.
Yes, I mean, the certain
Russians.
Russians.
Still Soviets.
Okay. Any other comments, Larry, before we...
No, I think you guys covered
All
it
right.
tonight.
Well, don't do military coups to be homophobic, kids.
No.
And there is no other queer nonprofit media platform like this in the entire world. Support our LGBT youth stories by sharing them and subscribing to Queer News Tonight.